What would you do if your boss made your job a living hell, then handed you the perfect opportunity to take him down? In today's story, the protagonist gets handed the keys to an international project and uses them to lock his tyrannical boss out of his own life. My name is Leo. And about 3 months before I finally quit this one particular job, I was reaching my breaking point. I worked for a small company that made 95% of its money from online sales. Yet I was the only programmer and developer left in an office of about 50 people. Management was non-existent. The owner was hopelessly indecisive. And to top it all off, other people had started taking credit for my work. I'd had enough. I found a new job quickly and handed in my 2 weeks' notice. But just then, a man who had only become my manager a few days prior, let's call him Marcus, begged me to stay. He dangled a huge raise and a brand new project in front of me. The company planned to open an outsourcing office in the Philippines, a kind of industrial web development hub. And they wanted me to run it. Since I was the only person in the company who'd ever lived in Asia, Marcus insisted I was essential. He offered a company-provided apartment in Manila, paid round-trip flights home every few months to see family, the works. After a few days of thinking it over, I decided it was worth a shot. And that's precisely when the nightmare began. First, Marcus demanded that if I wanted the job and the raise, I had to write the entire proposal myself. Then, HR ambushed me over that same proposal, claiming there was no way they would approve any of it besides my salary. It took Marcus pulling strings with the owner, his best friend, just to get it pushed through. Then came the second problem: our departure was almost immediate. This meant there was no time to get immunizations for things like malaria, a fact I thankfully never had to suffer the consequences for. A few days before we were scheduled to leave, Marcus took off early to visit his kids in LA. When my departure day came, on a miserable February morning, I walked into the airport in Texas, where the company was based, only to discover my ticket had also been booked to leave from LA. I spent the entire day in a frantic back and forth with HR, trying to convince them that it was Marcus's mistake, not mine. I finally got on a new flight the next day and met up with him in Tokyo for our connection. As we stood in line to board our flight to Manila, Marcus leaned in and whispered that he had forgotten to get us work visas. Marcus casually mentioned he forgot our work visas, completely unaware that this single, reckless oversight was the first thread he pulled in the unraveling of his own career. At the time, I didn't grasp the sheer stupidity of this mistake. When we landed in Manila, we checked into a major hotel. Before my head could even hit the pillow, a heavy, meaty-fisted knocking echoed on my door. It was Marcus, eager to go out and see the town. The night that followed was a blur of about 30 drinks, a midget boxing match, and a couple of escorts. By 6 a.m., I was exhausted and told Marcus I was heading back. My duties as the company's sole programmer didn't stop just because I'd left the country. The folks back in the Texas office couldn't seem to wrap their heads around the time difference and were blowing up my phone all night with urgent tasks. For the next 2 days, I was chained to my laptop, programming constantly and pleading for sleep, while Marcus was apparently on a non-stop party binge. Then, that same meaty-fisted pounding on my door again. Marcus had gotten an earful from the owner, complaining that we hadn't accomplished anything yet. No surprise there. Our main goals were to find an office space and an apartment. So we spent the next 3 weeks running all over the city. While I was hunting for an office, Marcus found an apartment. He made the decision without consulting me. even though I was the one who would be living in it. The place was a disaster. It had a massive cockroach infestation. The water barely worked. And the air conditioning was completely broken, a death sentence in Manila's heat. To make matters worse, the internet was a pay-as-you-go service that cost $15 every 3 days for a crawling 15 megabits per second connection. This was just fantastic for the guy who needed a robust connection for heavy web development. A few days later, Marcus left. But before he did, he hired a girl he'd met at a club where she worked as a bartender. He wanted to sleep with her, so he gave her the title of executive assistant. We'll call her Isla. Isla was the only good thing to come out of my entire time there. In fact, it was Isla who saved me by asking how long my tourist visa lasted, reminding me that my legal 30 days in the country were almost up. I tried frantically to get a hold of Marcus, but got no response. HR was useless. I had to pay for a flight to Okinawa out of my own pocket for a mini vacation just to renew my visa. While he was in Manila, Marcus had been paying Isla's salary, which was a great wage for the Philippines. But once he left, he got sloppy and completely forgot to pay her, a detail he also forgot to tell me. So there I was, sitting on a beach in Okinawa, rum in hand, laptop burning under the sun as I coded a new system for our company's website, when I get a furious international phone call from Marcus. He was livid that I hadn't paid Isla and that the business licensure fees hadn't been paid, $10,000 that he was supposed to provide, which I ended up covering myself. That was it. I was done. I snapped, screaming at him over the phone about the hellish working conditions, the lack of work visas, and the fact we still had no office. He had tormented me since he became my manager. He'd berated me, called me gay in front of women we met, and even, as some kind of sick joke, physically lifted me up and held me over the railing of the tallest skyscraper in Manila. This reveals Marcus's greatest fatal flaw, a deep-seated arrogance that made him believe he was untouchable, that his actions had no consequences. It was this belief that would ultimately seal his fate. After our screaming match, he had the audacity to calm down and congratulate me for finally standing up for myself. The nerve of that guy. I made 2 more calls that afternoon. First, I called Isla. She was in tears, knowing Marcus would blame me for his mistake but feeling powerless because she had already spent her first salary on getting running water for her family's home. I assured her I wasn't mad at her, but I made it crystal clear that I was done taking Marcus's abuse. My second call was to HR, to confirm that if I quit, they would still have to pay for my flight home. After my short trip to Okinawa, I flew back to Manila, where Isla picked me up. She was so apologetic. It was impossible to be angry. I told her exactly how much I hated Marcus and what I was planning to do. Even though she was making good money, she hated him more. And our little anti-Marcus alliance was forged. The next day, she invited me to her friend's birthday party. We drank. We took a cab. And before we even got back to my apartment, she was kissing me. Step 1 of my revenge was complete: steal the girl. About a week later, I got another international call from Marcus. He said the rest of the company was angry that I'd been on vacation in Okinawa and assumed I wasn't doing any work. I decided to lean into it. I lied and told him he was right, that I'd spent the whole time drinking at beach bonfires. He flew into a rage and threatened to write me up. Go for it, bro, I said. That pushed him over the edge. He told me he was flying back to Manila immediately to get things in order. Step 2 was complete: get Marcus back to Manila. He arrived a week later and scheduled a meeting at his favorite restaurant. By this point, Isla and I were basically living together. So we had to carefully time our departures to make it look like we were arriving from different places. We met Marcus, who then spent 3 hours insulting my principles, Isla's character, and my life experiences. The final blow was when he condescendingly told me he understood why I was struggling with business in a foreign country, since I wasn't used to moving across the planet. This, to me, who had been living in different countries since I was 11. Then, feeling charitable, he offered me a 2-week trip back to the States to see my family and get away from all the foreign stress. Feeling magnanimous, Marcus offered me a ticket home, thinking he was showing control and offering a reward. He had no idea he was personally handing me the key to my escape and the instrument of his destruction. Step 3 was complete: get back to the States. I said goodbye to Isla, flew to Texas, and was vegging out at my mom's house for a week and a half when HR called. They informed me that while Marcus had approved a 2-week vacation, I was only eligible for 1. I could take the second week, but it would be unpaid. I calmly ended the call, my mind filled with a cold, clear rage. I opened my laptop, deleted all the unpublished progress I had made on the company's website over the last few weeks, and began to type my resignation. It started with effective immediately. I quit. Wanna know why? I then unleashed a 2-page, meticulously detailed account of everything that had happened. I explained how Marcus wasted company funds on unused plane tickets, how I was forced to pay for visa renewal flights, business fees, rent, and international calls from my own pocket. I detailed how he spent company money on hookers, alcohol, and clubs. I explained that he hired our executive assistant solely in the hopes of sleeping with her. I outlined his missed payments, Isla's missed salary, and his complete failure to ever secure an actual office. I even included his brilliant idea to separate the Manila branch from the main company and sell our services back to them for a profit. And then came the final, glorious fallout. Shortly after I quit, Isla quit too. The last I heard, Marcus was fired. And because the company sponsored his work visa, he lost his right to stay in the States. He somehow convinced the owner to let him open the office anyway. But since he knew nothing about programming, he hired incompetent people, lost the contract, and the entire Philippine business collapsed. His life went into a tailspin. He reportedly married a Filipino hooker, had a heart attack, and is now homeless, drifting between Airbnbs. Step 4 complete: ruin Marcus's life. One person commented on my story, expressing a common sentiment from outsiders. As a Filipina who has experienced the headache of trying to fix the fuck-ups of a foreigner boss who had no idea how to fucking run a company in the Philippines, I feel for you and Nancy. Man. She was right. The chaos he created was a special kind of hell. I don't feel bad about any of it. Except maybe the heart attack, which I didn't cause. The man's eating habits were something doctors would call beyond unhealthy. As for me, I loved my time in Manila and Okinawa. And Isla and I have been in contact ever since. In fact, we're planning on getting married soon. Of course, some people are cynical. One commenter laid out their theory: Nancy meets you guys working as a guest relations officer, Fancy way of saying escort in the Philippines. Manager hires Nancy for a monthly salary to basically do nothing except fuck him when he's in town. Nancy gets you to fall in love with her. And now you're getting married to Nancy. And Nancy gets to emigrate to the US. Seems like Nancy is the one who won in this story. I get the skepticism. But it's been years now. I'm not an idiot. I've taken things slow. I don't send money. I've been clear about her family not moving here. And a prenup is mandatory. Honestly. Even in the worst case scenario. I can't see a downside. This story is a stark reminder that incompetent and abusive leadership will inevitably engineer its own downfall. The empires built on arrogance and disrespect are often the most fragile. So, let me ask you, have you ever had a boss who was their own worst enemy? What was the final mistake that brought them down? Let us know in the comments below.